For 6 years, Adam Schiff told America he held the ultimate evidence. But Speaker Mike Johnson needed only one classified transcript to prove the cooler was empty all along. There is a transcript that sat in the classified vault of the Intelligence Committee for 8 years. It records exactly what Adam Schiff was briefed on in February 2018, 6 months before he went on national television and told America there is plenty of evidence of collusion in plain sight. The transcript says there was no evidence. He was read into it, he knew. He went on television anyway. Mike Johnson brought that transcript to the hearing room, and in 40 minutes, the question that 330 million Americans have been asking for 6 years, where is the evidence, got its answer for the first time. Smash that like button, because you are about to witness what happens when a classified briefing transcript meets 6 years of television appearances and the transcript wins. Mr. Speaker, I was a federal prosecutor before you were a state legislator. I put a Russian operative in prison, a real one, not the imaginary ones your party invents, Schiff began. I chaired the Intelligence Committee. I led the impeachment of a corrupt president. I sat on the January 6th committee, and now I am being questioned by a man who voted to overturn a presidential election based on conspiracy theories that wouldn't survive a first-year law school exam. Adam Schiff was 6 minutes into an opening statement that carried the architecture of a closing argument. Each sentence was load-bearing, each clause designed to establish the witness's credentials while undermining the questioner's standing. The House Select Hearing on Classified Information Handling and Intelligence Committee Conduct convened in Capitol Room H 313 with C-SPAN carrying it live, and every network split-screening had drawn Schiff back to the chamber he had left when he won his Senate seat in 2024. He sat at the witness table with the posture of a man returning to a room he once owned. With all due respect, Mr. Speaker, I've been in rooms where evidence matters. This isn't one of them, he declared. The gallery behind the Democratic side produced the sharp, practiced sound of people validating credentials they already believed in. The man who had spent his career in rooms where evidence matters had been formally censured by the United States House of Representatives for misleading the American public. He had claimed on television to possess evidence that 4 separate federal investigations concluded did not exist, and he was currently the subject of a declassified federal whistleblower report alleging he had authorized leaks of classified national security information to target a sitting president. Speaker Mike Johnson sat at the center of the dais. Dark suit, red tie, the expression of a former constitutional law professor who has read the student's transcript, knows that the discussion ahead will be difficult, and has decided to be kind about it, because kindness in this context is more devastating than cruelty. His binder sat on the desk, thick, color-coded, tabbed. But inside the binder, in a separate sleeve marked with a classification control stamp that had been formally declassified for this hearing by the Director of National Intelligence at 6:47 a.m. that morning, was a document that no one in the room except Johnson, the committee counsel, and the DNI had seen. Senator, I appreciate that you mentioned evidence several times, Johnson said. He opened the binder. The 20th of March, 2017. NBC Meet the Press. You said there is circumstantial evidence of collusion. No warm-up, no framing. The quote first. The first punch landed. Schiff's composure. The prosecutorial composure. The composure of a man who had spent 25 years training his face to reveal nothing in courtrooms and committee rooms. Held. It was professional, practiced, and running at a level of effort that, to anyone who had spent time watching faces for a living, was approximately 15% too high. The composure of a man who is performing not worried slightly harder than a man who is actually not worried would need to. Johnson looked at the quote on the desk, then at Schiff, then at the committee. "Let's talk about evidence, Senator, because I have your words. I have the investigations that came after your words, and in between, I have something the Intelligence Committee never released to the public. Senator, I'm going to read your statements in chronological order, then I'm going to read the findings of the investigations that examined those statements, and then I'm going to show you what was in between," Johnson stated. He read the first quote, already on the desk from the opening, the 20th of March, 2017. "There is circumstantial evidence of collusion." Circumstantial. That's a legal term. It means indirect. It means I don't have proof, but I have suggestions. It's a hedge, and at that point, Senator, a hedge was defensible. The investigation had just begun. Hedging was reasonable. He pulled a second sheet. 3 days later, the 23rd of March 2017, MSNBC, MTP Daily. Chuck Todd asks you if you're relying solely on a circumstantial case. You say, and I'm quoting, "No, there is evidence that is not circumstantial, and it is very much worthy of investigation." He placed the second quote beside the first. 3 days apart. In 3 days, Senator, circumstantial became not circumstantial. The hedge disappeared. You went from indirect suggestions to direct evidence in 72 hours without a single new public development in the investigation. Schiff's right hand found his pen. The lawyer's comfort object, the thing lawyers hold when they need something between themselves and the room. The pen began rolling between his index finger and thumb, not dramatically, just the slow rotation of an object that is being used not for writing, but for the management of energy that has no other outlet. Johnson pulled a third sheet. August 2018, CBS News. "I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight." Plenty. In plain sight. Senator, those are not hedging words. Those are words of certainty, words that a former prosecutor, which you are, uses when he is prepared to go to trial. The pen stopped rolling. Schiff's thumb pressed against the cap. The pressure was invisible to the gallery, but it was visible on the C-SPAN close-up camera, the white crescent of a thumbnail compressing plastic, the unconscious application of force to an object that cannot push back. April 2019, 1 month after the Mueller report was released, I've been very clear over the past year and a half, that there is ample evidence of collusion in plain sight. Ample. Not some, not suggestive. Ample. He set the pen on the table, not a dramatic gesture, just the quiet release of a hand that had been holding something and had decided that holding it was no longer helping. The pen lay on the table between Schiff's hands, abandoned. The first comfort object to fail. Senator, let me read that progression back to you. March 2017, circumstantial. 3 days later, not circumstantial. August 2018, plenty. In plain sight. April 2019, ample. Over 2 years, your language escalated from hedged to absolute, from suggestion to certainty, from indirect to in plain sight. Now, let me read what the investigations found. He placed a new row of documents below the quotes. 2 rows. Quotes on top, findings on bottom. Robert Mueller's Special Counsel Report, March 2019. 2 years, 2,000, 800 subpoenas, 500 witnesses, 500 search warrants. Conclusion. The investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government. Did not establish. Schiff's jaw clenched, the prosecutor jaw, the cross-examination jaw. The jaw that he had used for 25 years to project authority while asking questions in courtrooms and committee rooms. but he was not asking questions, he was receiving them. And the jaw that was designed for offense was now being deployed in defense. And the configuration was wrong, the way a shield is wrong when you try to use it as a sword. Special Counsel John Durham, May 2023. 4 years. Conclusion. Neither you, law enforcement, nor the intelligence community appears to have possessed any actual evidence of collusion in their holdings at the commencement of the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. Any actual evidence? None, at any time. Schiff's interlocked fingers, the fingers that had replaced the pen, that had found each other the way hands find each other when individual hands are no longer trustworthy, tightened, the knuckles whitened by a shade, not dramatically, just by the shade that separates a hand at rest from a hand under load. Inspector General Michael Horowitz, December 2019. 17 significant errors and omissions in the FISA warrant applications. FISA Court Presiding Judge Rosemary Collier stated that the FBI misled the FISC. Misled. The court's word, not mine. Johnson arranged the 2 rows. Quotes on top. Findings on bottom. 6 documents total. 2 years of statements, 3 investigations, 1 censure. Senator, on the top row are your words circumstantial, not circumstantial, plenty, ample, in plain sight. On the bottom row are the conclusions of every investigation that examined those words did not establish. No actual evidence. 17 errors, misled. Now, Senator, I want to count something because I'm a teacher, and teachers count things. He pulled a committee-prepared analysis. The committee staff conducted a review of your public media appearances between January 2017 and April 2019, the period during which you made claims about collusion evidence. The review identified 237 television appearances on which you used the words evidence, collusion, or conspiracy in reference to the Trump-Russia investigation, 237 appearances on 6 networks over 27 months. In those 237 appearances, you used the word evidence in direct reference to collusion approximately 412 times. 412 times. Senator, you told America you had evidence. Not once. Not 10 times. 412 times. Mueller had 2,800 subpoenas and found nothing. You had 412 television appearances and found plenty. Senator, either you are the greatest intelligence analyst in American history, or you were saying something on television that you knew was not supported by the intelligence you had access to. The distance between these 2 rows is not a disagreement, Senator. He paused. The pause of a man who is about to change the temperature of the room. Unless you knew something Mueller didn't. As chairman of the Intelligence Committee, had access to evidence that a special counsel with 2,800 subpoenas could not find. So, the committee asked a question. A simple question. What were you briefed? What did the intelligence community actually tell you in classified session about the existence of evidence? He reached into the separate sleeve of the binder, the sleeve with the classification control stamp, the sleeve that had been declassified at 6:47 a.m. that morning. The Director of National Intelligence declassified this document for today's hearing. It is an intelligence community briefing summary dated the 14th of February 2018. The room changed, not in sound, in density. The air acquired the quality of air in a room where a document is about to be read that changes the meaning of everything that came before it. The briefing was provided to the chairman and ranking member of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. You were chairman, Senator. He read. At this time, the intelligence community has not identified corroborated evidence establishing coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russian government beyond the publicly known contacts that have been reported to Congress. He set the document on the desk between the two rows, the document that sat between what Schiff said and what the investigations found. The document that answered the question no one had been able to answer for 6 years, did he know, has not identified corroborated evidence. That is what the intelligence community told you in a classified briefing on the 14th of February 2018. 6 months later. 6 months, Senator. You went on CBS and told America, "I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight." He looked at Schiff. "Senator, you weren't wrong. Wrong is when you believe something that turns out not to be true. Wrong is honest. Wrong is human. You were briefed. You were told by the intelligence community of the United States in a classified setting, on a document you signed as received, that no corroborated evidence existed, and you went on television and you told 330 million Americans that there was plenty. That's not being wrong, Senator. That's knowing and saying it anyway." Schiff's eyes narrowed. Not the narrowing of anger, the narrowing of a man who has just heard something he did not expect to hear in this room. Not the content, he knew the content. He had been present for the briefing. The surprise was the document, here on the desk, declassified, public. The thing that was supposed to stay in the classified vault, the thing that separated was wrong from new and lied, was now on a desk in a hearing room with 40 cameras rolling and 20 million people watching. His hands, the interlocked hands, the hands that had replaced the pen, separated. The fingers, unbraided. Both hands went flat on the table, palms down. Fingers spread. The posture of a man who has stopped holding things because holding things requires a decision about what to hold, and no decision is available. Johnson turned a tab. "Senator, I want to talk about the 26th of September 2019, the day you read a fabricated version of President Trump's phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky into the Congressional record." He pulled 2 transcripts, placed them side by side. On the left is the actual White House transcript of the call, released by the White House, available to the public. On the right is what you read at the hearing. He read from Schiff's version. "I want you to make up dirt on my political opponent. Understand? Lots of it. On this and on that." Then from the actual transcript, the actual words, which did not contain that sentence, which did not contain anything resembling that sentence. "Senator, those words do not appear in the transcript. You fabricated dialogue, you attributed it to the President of the United States, and you read it into the Congressional record, under the gavel, in a hearing that was broadcast live on every network." Schiff's posture shifted, not visibly, not in the way that cameras typically capture, but structurally. The prosecutorial stillness acquired a new quality, rigidity. Not the rigidity of control, the rigidity of prevention. His body was preventing itself from doing something, leaning forward, interrupting, objecting, and the prevention was consuming resources that had been allocated to composure. The way a dam consumes the river's energy by holding it back, and the holding back is itself a form of force that the structure was not designed to sustain indefinitely. When you were confronted about it, you said, and I'm quoting, "It was meant to be, at least part, in parody." At least part, in parody. Senator, in a courtroom, which you know well, presenting fabricated testimony as real is not parody. It is fraud upon the tribunal. And you didn't present it in a comedy club, you presented it in a committee hearing, under oath of office, on live television. But what concerns me more than the parody itself, Senator, is how it got there. He reached into the binder. The committee obtained communications from your staff in the days preceding the September 26th hearing. Schiff attempted to interject. Mr. Speaker, the characterization of Johnson raised one finger. The index finger of his right hand lifted slowly. The teacher's finger. The pastor's finger. The finger that does not command but requests. And the request carries the authority of a man who has been listening for 30 minutes without interrupting and is now spending that accumulated authority on a single quiet demand wait. Schiff's sentence. The characterization of hung in the air incomplete. The third word, waiting for the fourth word that would never arrive. His mouth remained open for 1 second, then closed. The rigidity in his posture deepened. An internal communication dated the 24th of September 2019, 2 days before the hearing, between a senior member of your staff and your communications director, discusses the planned reading. Johnson said, "I'll read the relevant line. He wants to read the summary version, not the verbatim transcript. We know it'll get clipped as the real thing. By the time the correction cycles, the clip will have 10 million views. The clip travels before the correction." He set the communication on the desk. The clip travels before the correction. Senator, your staff knew. They knew the fabricated version would be broadcast. They knew it would be clipped. They knew the clip would be shared, as if it were the real call. And they designed it that way. That is not a miscommunication, that is a strategy. The strategy is lie on camera, knowing the lie will travel faster than the correction, and by the time the correction arrives, the lie has already done its work. The room absorbed the phrase. The clip travels before the correction. The phrase was not the parody, it was not the correction. It was the strategy of making the lie travel faster than the truth, and the strategy, once named, was visible in everything Schiff had done for 6 years. Every eye have seen evidence on television was a clip that traveled before the correction. Every claim of plenty and ample and in plain sight was a clip that traveled before Mueller, before Durham, before Horowitz could correct it. The strategy was the career, and Johnson had just named it. I also want to address one more statement you made publicly. Senator, before the impeachment inquiry, you told reporters, and I'm quoting, "We have not spoken directly with the whistleblower. Your staff had, in fact, communicated with the whistleblower before the complaint was filed. You misled the public about your office's role in initiating the very impeachment you led, Senator. The pattern is, say it on camera, let the clip travel, correct it later quietly after the damage is done, and hope that the correction never catches up. The parody didn't catch up for weeks. The whistleblower denial didn't catch up for months. The I have seen evidence didn't catch up for 6 years. But it's catching up now. On the 21st of June, 2023, the United States House of Representatives voted 213 to 209 to censure you. Senator, the resolution stated that you had been censured for, and am reading the resolution's own language, misleading the American public, and for conduct unbecoming of an elected member of the House of Representatives. You stood in the well of this chamber. The Speaker read the resolution. Democratic members chanted shame. It was a formal determination by vote that you had misled the American people. He paused, and then you raised $8.1 million. Not over a year, not over a quarter. $8.1 million in the immediate aftermath of the censure, from small-dollar donors, from people who believed in you. He pulled 2 documents side by side. The censure resolution on the left, a printed fundraising email on the right. Senator, the committee's analysts compared the language in your post-censure fundraising emails with the actual text of the censure resolution. Let me show the committee what your donors were told. The censure resolution says misleading the American public. Your fundraising email says censured for standing up to Donald Trump. The resolution says conduct unbecoming of an elected member. Your email says punished for defending democracy. The resolution says falsehoods, misrepresentations, and abuses of sensitive information. Your email says, targeted by MAGA extremists for telling the truth. Senator, the censure resolution is 4 pages long. Not one sentence mentions standing up to Trump. Not one sentence mentions defending democracy. Not one sentence uses the phrase, telling the truth. The resolution says, you lied. Your fundraising emails say you were punished for truth-telling. Schiff's composure. The composure that had been running at 15% overcorrection since Chapter 1, that had lost a pen in Chapter 2, that had been rigidified in Chapter 3, was now visible to the room, not just the cameras. The overcorrection had reached 25%. The stillness was too perfect. The breathing was too measured. The blink rate was too low. The room could see a man performing not worried, and the performance itself was broadcasting the opposite of its intention. Your donors, the people giving $20, $50, $100, gave $8.1 million. They thought they were funding courage. They were funding a cover-up. The first lie was, I have seen evidence. The second lie was telling your donors you were censured for heroism instead of censured for lying. $8.1 million from a lie about a lie. He set the fundraising analysis beside the briefing transcript, the staff email, and the censure resolution. The desk was filling up. Each document was a chapter in a career built on the distance between what was said and what was true. Now, Senator, I want to talk about something more serious than money. I want to talk about national security. In August 2025, the White House declassified testimony from a career intelligence officer, a Democrat who worked on the House Intelligence Committee staff for more than a decade. The officer testified under oath that you personally authorized the disclosure of classified information to media outlets for the purpose of damaging President Trump. A separate FBI 302 document, also declassified, corroborates the whistleblower's account. The whistleblower repeatedly warned the FBI that classified information was being leaked from the committee at your direction. He pulled the final document from the binder. A committee-prepared summary of a damage assessment the committee obtained through the Director of National Intelligence, an assessment of the impact of unauthorized disclosures from the Intelligence Committee during your chairmanship. The assessment identifies 11 instances over 18 months in which classified information from Intelligence Committee briefings appeared in media reporting within 72 hours of the briefing. Schiff attempted to interject again. Mr. Speaker, the characterization of the same words, the third time. The phrase had become a reflex, the default response of a man whose objection vocabulary had been reduced to a single phrase by the accumulation of damage. Johnson did not raise his finger this time. He simply continued reading at the same volume, and Schiff's sentence dissolved into the current of Johnson's voice, the way a tributary dissolves into a river. In 7 of those 11 instances, the disclosed information subsequently appeared in foreign intelligence analytical products within 5 to 9 days of media publication. Schiff's voice, the voice that had carried, I have seen evidence across 6 networks for 6 years. The voice trained in courtrooms to project authority at volumes calibrated for jury distance, attempted the word characterization for the 3rd time and produced, on the 2nd syllable, a microtremor. Not audible to the gallery, not audible to the committee members 10 feet away, but audible on the C-SPAN audio feed. A 1.5 hertz elevation in pitch. The involuntary signature of a vocal cord under stress that has been performing calm for 40 minutes and has encountered a fact it was not calibrated for. The tremor lasted less than a second. It occupied less than 1 syllable. But the C-SPAN audio engineers would analyze it later, and the analysis would confirm what the room had begun to sense. The prosecutorial voice was cracking from the inside. Senator, I want to walk through one example so the committee understands the pattern. Instance number 4. On the 7th of March 2018, the Intelligence Committee received a classified briefing on a counterintelligence matter related to surveillance authorities. The briefing was attended by you, the ranking member, and 6 other committee members. On the 9th of March 2018, 72 hours later, the Washington Post published an article containing details that the damage assessment identifies as consistent with information presented in the March 7th briefing and not available through other public sources. On the 16th of March 2018, 7 days after the Post article, the assessment notes that a foreign intelligence analytical product referenced the same information with sourcing attributed to open Western media reporting. Tuesday briefing. Thursday article. Following week Foreign Intelligence Service. That pattern repeated 11 times. Senator, 11 Tuesdays, 11 Thursdays, 11 foreign pickups. Senator. That means classified information from American intelligence briefings. Briefings you attended. Briefings you chaired. Leaked to the press within 72 hours, and foreign intelligence services had it within a week. 11 times over 18 months. He set the assessment down. The pattern is, you were briefed on Tuesday, the Washington Post published on Thursday. A foreign intelligence service had it by the following week. He looked at Schiff. Senator, that's not a leak. That's a schedule. The word schedule landed in the room the way verdicts land, not as argument, but as conclusion. The room received it not as an accusation, but as a description. And descriptions are harder to rebut than accusations because they do not ask for agreement. They simply state what is visible. Schiff's pen, the pen that had been lying on the table since he abandoned it in Chapter 2, the pen that had been still for 20 minutes, rolled 2 inches to the left. The pen moved on its own, dislodged by a vibration transmitted through the table surface from Schiff's forearms, which were pressed against the table edge. He had not touched the pen. His arms, bearing the weight of his controlled posture, had trembled, a micro-tremor invisible to the eye, measurable only in its effect on objects. The pen's movement was the first time Schiff's body had produced evidence that his mind did not authorize. Johnson turned to the final tab. Johnson's voice changed, lower, warmer, the register of a pastor who is about to say something that he wishes were not true. Senator, I want to talk to you as one lawyer to another. Not as speaker to senator, not as Republican to Democrat. As one person who took an oath to another person who took the same oath. You told America on NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, in hundreds of interviews over 6 years, that you had seen evidence of Russian collusion. You said it was more than circumstantial. You said it was in plain sight. You said there was plenty. You said there was ample. Mueller investigated for 2 years, 2,000. 800 subpoenas, 500 witnesses, 500 search warrants. He did not find your evidence. Durham investigated for 4 years. He did not find your evidence. Inspector General Horowitz investigated. He found 17 errors in the process that was based on your evidence. The FISA court said the FBI misled them. You were censured by this House for promoting your evidence. Your staff designed a strategy to make fabricated clips travel before corrections. Your fundraising emails lied about why you were censured. Classified information from your briefings appeared in foreign intelligence reports 11 times. And the intelligence community, in a briefing you received and signed for on the 14th of February 2018, told you they had not identified corroborated evidence of collusion. Senator, I am a teacher. Before I came to Congress, I stood in front of classrooms, and I taught my students that the most important thing a person can do with language is tell the truth. Because language is the only tool we have to build trust between people who cannot verify things for themselves. 330 million Americans could not verify your claims. They didn't have security clearances. They didn't sit in classified briefings. They couldn't read the intelligence. They had to trust you. You were the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. You had the clearance, you had the access, and you told them for 6 years, on every network, in every living room, that you had seen evidence. They believed you because why would the chairman lie? The question, Senator, where is the evidence? You said you saw it. Show it to this committee, right now. This is the room where evidence matters. You said so yourself. If you have evidence of Russian collusion that 4 federal investigations missed, that a special counsel with 2,800 subpoenas could not find, that the intelligence community told you did not exist, show it. This is your moment. 5 seconds. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 seconds. The longest silence in the series. In a room that was smaller than the Senate chambers where Vance and Kennedy had worked, which meant the silence was closer, which meant every second lasted longer, which meant 15 seconds in H. 313 felt like a minute. Schiff's prosecutorial composure, the composure that had been running at 25% overcorrection, that had lost a pen, rigidified against a parody transcript, survived a fundraising analysis, absorbed 11 leak instances, and watched a classified briefing transcript land on a desk between 6 years of television claims and 4 investigations that found nothing, reached its terminal state. The composure did not collapse, it froze. The distinction matters. A collapse is visible, the audience sees it happen. A freeze is invisible, it looks exactly like composure. The face was still. The hands were still. The breathing was still, but the stillness was no longer the product of control. It was the product of a system that had encountered a question it was never designed to process, and had defaulted to the only response, remaining nothing. Schiff's eyes, the prosecutor's eyes, the eyes that had delivered "I have seen evidence" into cameras on 6 networks, with the absolute certainty of a man who believed his own narrative so completely that the believing had become indistinguishable from the knowing, stayed open, fixed. Not the extended blink of a person absorbing a blow, not the camera search of a person looking for an audience, the fixed, unblinking stare of a man who is looking at the person asking the question and understanding for the first time in 25 years of legal and political combat that the question cannot be answered, cannot be deflected, cannot be reframed, cannot be parried. Because the question is a request for a physical object, and the object does not exist, and everyone in the room knows it does not exist, and the 15 seconds of not producing it are the proof. You can't show it, Senator. Johnson's voice was quiet, not triumphant, not cruel, sad. The genuine sadness of a teacher who has caught a student cheating and wishes he hadn't, because it doesn't exist. It never existed. The intelligence community told you it didn't exist, and you went on television for 6 years and told America it did. I'm a teacher, Senator. I've taught students who cheated on exams. Some cheated because they panicked, some because they were lazy, but the ones I could never forgive, the ones that kept me up at night, were the ones who cheated, got caught, and told the class the test was unfair. You told America you had evidence. You didn't. You got caught, and you told your donors the censure was unfair, and raised $8.1 million. That's not a mistake, Senator. That's a career. He closed the binder, pen in spine. No further questions, Schiff responded. His response lasted 2 minutes and 31 seconds. It was the most polished response in the hearing series because Adam Schiff was the most practiced speaker in the hearing series. A man who had spent 6 years delivering arguments on television to audiences of millions, and who could construct a rebuttal, the way a carpenter constructs a wall plank by plank, nail by nail, structurally sound and load-bearing. He mentioned partisan motivation. He mentioned that the Durham investigation was itself deeply flawed. He mentioned that history would judge his actions favorably. He mentioned that the intelligence community's assessments evolved over time, and that the February 2018 briefing did not represent the totality of available information. He mentioned, "I stand by everything I said." His response was the closing argument of a prosecutor who has lost the case and is now addressing the appellate court of public opinion, not to win, because winning is no longer possible, but to delay the verdict in the hope that delay will be mistaken for doubt, and doubt will be mistaken for innocence. It addressed nothing, not the briefing transcript, not the specific language has not identified corroborated evidence, not the date, not the fact that it preceded his most confident television claims by 6 months, not the staff email, not the clip travels before the correction, not the fundraising email analysis, not the systematic misrepresentation of the censure to donors, not the damage assessment, not the 11 leaks, not the 7-2-hour pattern, not the foreign intelligence pickup, not where is the evidence. Johnson did not react. He had already closed the binder. The pen was in the spine. He stood, buttoned his jacket the way he buttoned everything carefully, completely. The habits of a man who was taught that how you do small things is how you do all things. He did not look at Schiff on his way out. The first clip to break was the briefing transcript. Johnson, reading the February 2018 Intelligence Community Summary, has not identified corroborated evidence, followed by the August 2018 CBS clip of Schiff saying, "Plenty of evidence in plain sight." The juxtaposition classified reality versus public claim, 6 months apart, from the same man was 17 seconds long. It was shared 37 million times in the first 24 hours. It was the clip that answered the question. For 6 years, where is the evidence had been a rhetorical weapon used by Republicans. After the hearing, it was an answered question. The answer was, there was none. He was told there was none. He said there was plenty. The second clip was, the clip travels before the correction. The staff email read aloud, followed by Johnson's analysis. That is not a miscommunication. That is a strategy. The phrase became the shorthand for everything Schiff had built. The phrase appeared in media criticism columns, in journalism school syllabi, and press ethics conference agendas. CNN's Jake Tapper, who had hosted Schiff more than any other anchor during the collusion years, addressed it on air. In retrospect, we should have pressed harder. We gave a platform. It was used. And the clip traveled before the correction. The statement was not an apology, it was an admission. And admissions from the anchors who built Schiff's platform were more damaging than any Republican attack. The third clip was a lie about a lie. The side-by-side of censure resolution language versus fundraising email language. This clip traveled through donor communities and campaign finance watchdog organizations. The phrase $8.1 million from a lie about a lie became the framework that the FEC used when it opened a formal review of whether Schiff's post-censure fundraising emails constituted misleading solicitation under federal election law. The fourth clip was, "That's not a leak, that's a schedule." The damage assessment summary. This clip traveled through intelligence and national security communities with a velocity that surprised even the committee staff. Former intelligence officers shared it with commentary that was in the restrained vocabulary of the intelligence community devastating. If these disclosures occurred as described, the responsible party committed multiple felonies. The political consequences were immediate and structural. The United States Senate voted to deny Adam Schiff membership on the Senate Intelligence Committee. The vote was 54 to 43, with 3 Democrats, each of whom represented states with significant military and intelligence community populations, voting with Republicans. It was the first time in Senate history that a sitting senator had been formally denied a committee assignment based on conduct in a prior chamber. Schiff had sought the Intelligence Committee seat as the capstone of his career, the Senate version of the chairmanship he had held in the House. The denial removed not only the committee seat, but the security clearance access, the briefing access, and the institutional authority that came with it. Adam Schiff, the man who had built a 5-year career on the phrase as chairman of the Intelligence Committee, was now a senator without intelligence access. The brand was severed from its source. Attorney General Kash Patel formally referred the classified leak allegations, the whistleblower testimony, the FBI 302, and the damage assessment to the DOJ Criminal Division for investigation. Unauthorized disclosure of classified information under 18 U.S.C. Section 798 carries a penalty of up to 10 years in federal prison. Grand jury subpoenas were issued for Schiff's Intelligence Committee communications, staff records, and meeting logs from the period 2017 to 2023. The investigation was not a review, it was not an inquiry. It was a criminal investigation with subpoena power and a grand jury, and the target was a sitting United States senator. CNN published a formal editor's note, the first in the network's history related to a single source's credibility. The note stated, "Over the period 2017 to 2023, CNN provided extensive, largely unchallenged coverage of then-Representative Adam Schiff's claims regarding evidence of Russian collusion. In light of the declassified intelligence community briefing transcript presented at the May 2026 hearing, which indicates that Representative Schiff was informed by the IC that no corroborated evidence of collusion had been identified prior to his most emphatic public claims, CNN acknowledges that our coverage should have more rigorously challenged those claims. MSNBC did not publish a formal correction, but quietly removed 47 Schiff interview clips from its YouTube archive over the following 2 weeks. Schiff's book, Midnight in Washington, published in 2021 as a bestseller built on the narrative that he had fought to expose Russian collusion, experienced returns exceeding sales for 3 consecutive weeks following the hearing. The publisher postponed the paperback edition indefinitely. The book's core premise that Schiff had been vindicated, that the evidence was real, that the investigations had been politically compromised, had been dismantled by a single document, a classified briefing from February 2018 that said the evidence did not exist, signed as received by the man who spent the next 5 years telling America it did. Johnson gave no interviews. When a reporter caught him in the Capitol hallway, he stopped, adjusted his glasses. I was a teacher for a long time. The hardest thing a teacher ever has to do is show a student the distance between what they said and what was true. It's hard because the student usually knows. They knew before you showed them. They just hoped no one would check. He paused. Someone checked. In Madisonville, Louisiana, Gerald Thibodeau stood behind the counter of the bait shop. The television was on. The hearing replay was running. The Tuesday Catfish regular stood at the counter, bag of shiners in hand, watching. Boudreaux once told me something, Gerald said. The customer waited. Gerald's Boudreaux stories were part of the price of shiners. Boudreaux said, a man who tells you he caught a 1-2 pound bass better have the fish in the cooler, because if he doesn't, he didn't catch anything. He just told a story. Gerald bagged the shiners, counted by feel. Senator Schiff told America he caught the biggest fish in political history. Told him for 6 years. Told him on every channel. Told M in a book. Johnson opened the cooler. He handed over the bag. It was empty. The customer paid, paused at the door. But here's the thing Boudreaux also said. Gerald continued, the worst part isn't that the cooler is empty. The worst part is the man knew it was empty when he told you about the fish. And he told you anyway, because he wanted you to think he was a fisherman. The bell rang. The customer left. Gerald turned back to the television. Johnson was closing the binder, pen in spine, standing, buttoning his jacket. Someone checked, Gerald said to the empty shop. He wiped the counter, rearranged the spinners. The shop smelled like bait and coffee and the bayou. In Middletown, Ohio, Crystal Atkins sat in the break room of the Brighter Days Recovery Center. The television was on. Donna was there. The coffee was cold. This one is different from the others, Crystal said. How? The others were about things people did. Omar stole. AOC performed. Clinton survived. Newsom lost billions. Those are actions. You can point at them. You can measure them. She looked at the screen. Schiff's 15 seconds of silence. The fixed stare. The frozen composure. This one is about something a man said. He said he had evidence. He said it for 6 years on every channel, in every living room in America. And he didn't have it. And the briefing transcript shows he knew he didn't have it. He was told in a classified room by the intelligence community that the evidence did not exist, and he walked out of that room and onto a television set and said it did. She paused. That's the worst kind. Not the stealing, not the performing, not the losing, the knowing. Because when you steal money, you hurt the people you steal from. When you perform caring, you disappoint the people who believed you. When you lose billions, you damage a state. But when you know the truth, and you say the opposite for 6 years on television to 330 million people, you don't just hurt them. You change what they believe about the world. You make them think something is real that isn't. And then, when the truth comes out, they don't just lose faith in you. They lose faith in the next person who says, I have evidence, and the next person might be telling the truth. She rinsed her cup. Hot water, no soap, upside down on the rack. That's the real damage. Not the $8.1 million. Not the classified leaks. The trust. He used up the country's trust. And trust, once it's gone, doesn't come back because someone holds a hearing. Donna looked at the screen. Johnson walking to the elevator. Someone checked. Someone always checks, Crystal said. The question is whether it matters when they do. She walked back to the group room. 8 people trying to stay alive. The television played on in the empty break room. Where is the evidence, Senator? 15 seconds. A fixed stare. An empty cooler. The screen cut to commercial. If you made it this far, you just watched what happens when a classified briefing transcript that sat in a vault for 8 years meets 6 years of television appearances, and the transcript says, the man who told America he had evidence was told in a classified room that the evidence did not exist. Smash that like button if Mike Johnson reminded you that the most important question in politics is the simplest one. Show me the evidence. Subscribe for more stories where binders beat narratives and briefing transcripts beat television appearances. Share this with everyone who spent 6 years hearing I have seen evidence and wondered where. Comment below what was your moment? The briefing transcript? The clip travels before the correction? The fundraising email side by side? That's not a leak? That's a schedule? The pen that moved on its own? Or the 15 seconds of silence after show it to us? Turn on notifications because the briefing transcript is public now. The Intelligence Committee denied his seat. The criminal referral is real. The grand jury subpoenas are out. CNN published an editor's note. And somewhere in a hearing room, a binder is closed, a pen is in the spine, and a teacher is walking to the elevator saying, "Someone checked. He came with credentials. Johnson came with a binder. He had 2 minutes of nothing. Johnson had 15 seconds of everything." He said, "I have seen evidence." Johnson said, "Show it." 15 seconds. An empty cooler. That's the answer. God bless the 330 million Americans who heard "I have seen evidence" and believed it because the chairman of the Intelligence Committee said it. God bless the donors who gave $8.1 million because they were told the censure was about courage. God bless the intelligence officers who watched classified information appear in newspapers 72 hours after their briefings. God bless the teachers who teach their students that the most important thing you can do with language is tell the truth. God bless everyone who has ever trusted a person with a title, a clearance, and a camera, and discovered 6 years later, in a hearing room on a Tuesday afternoon, that the cooler was empty. The clip traveled before the correction, but the correction just arrived.